Hey guys, I'm Jason. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I have a really special guest with me today, Mr. Terry Linton. He's going to talk a little bit about himself, but I've known Terry for quite a while now, and I'm really excited to have him here talking about how design is perceived from outside the design department. How are we working with our administrators? How are we working with our school community to make sure that design is the best it can be? So, welcome, Terry. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jason. And just in case your listeners want to start switching off now, I am not a design teacher
Right.
by trade, uh, but but I'm sure we're still going to have some fantastic discussions about design because
Mm,
I believe in my heart of hearts that design is the most important subject that we teach in schools today.
mm.
And so, coming from that frame, I'll just give my background a little bit.
Okay,
So
great.
I'm the director of curriculum at the Beanstalk Education Group in Beijing, China. We
Mm,
have 6 schools around China, with 4 in Beijing and 1 in Kunming and 1 in Chengdu. We're an IB World School, so we offer the 3 programs of the PYP, MYP, and DP. And prior to becoming the curriculum director, and I'll share with you exactly what I do
mm,
because it may be of interest. Prior to that, I was an MYP coordinator, and I've been an MYP coordinator for the last 10 years.
mm.
I lead workshop as well, and that's how I know you really,
That's
is that
right,
we
that's
both
right.
are keen on delivering and sharing
Yeah.
the knowledge and
Mm,
experience that we've gained so far. So I lead workshops and do school visits, and ultimately what we're looking for in terms of developing the curriculum is we're looking
mm,
for those integrations, that holy grail of transfer.
mhm.
And ultimately that's what design can offer us, is the ability to transfer, right?
Yeah, and I believe everybody listening would completely agree with you that design is the best subject, the most important subject. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm glad you're a convert.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the thing that when you walk by a room and you see kids really engaged with what's happening, and you just look at it as a percentage of rooms you walk by,
Mm.
is the design rooms is one where you can always see, kind of, unless they're doing their design brief, which I'm sure kids are not too excited about doing, but
I think
but
everyone would
but
agree with
when
you there too.
but when they're actually doing
Yeah.
the things that they say that they're going to try to do,
Mm,
that experiencing component
mhm.
is such a critical piece, and that engagement is just so, far and above, heads and shoulders with many of the subjects.
Mm. Absolutely. And so you're in Beijing, but clearly you didn't probably start your career there. How did you get to Beijing?
All right, so I became a certified teacher in Canada, and
Mm,
so coming from Manitoba, so my first international gig was a Manitoba curriculum school in Guangzhou. So I
mhm,
was there for a few years, and then I thought about moving into the IB world. So I was in Surabaya in
mhm.
Indonesia for 4 years, and then I was in Jakarta for a year at Cinemas World Academy, and now I've been in Beijing for the last 6 years with Beanstalk,
Wow.
and yeah, that's I just signed another 3-year contract, so I'll be here
Wow.
for a little while. Safest place on earth right
Safest
now,
place. Almost the safest place, exactly.
almost. Yeah.
That's awesome. I always love to hear how people get from, the beginning, and to where they are now, because it's so neat to hear the journeys that people take and the different, directions things go to get you to this point. So that's great to hear. That's
Right,
awesome.
and I didn't mention my sort of subject specialties. So my first job when I went to Guangzhou at the Manitoba school was I was actually the computer science teacher.
Oh, so
So
you are a
so
design teacher. So don't say that you're
well,
not a design teacher, man.
you know.
Uh,
So, but that was largely
Mm,
following a set curriculum in
sure.
terms of going through, like, this is now what, like, 15 years ago. So
Right.
we were teaching kids how to use Microsoft products, and
Sure.
how
Sure.
to design a very simple,
Right.
website
Mm,
using HTML, right? It's
exactly. Sure.
everything. I'm sure that you would have been down that road like many years ago as well,
Mhm.
because those were kind of things that you thought you had to teach kids. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody ever is. Are there any courses anymore where someone has to teach a kid how to use Microsoft Word?
No, no, but, there are still coding courses, even
Yeah, oh,
though there's,
definitely.
HTML editors, that are, drag and drop and things, but I even still have students who will ask me, "Okay, so how do I make this different?" And so they'll actually get into the HTML code. And
Mhm.
so my background of doing that 15, 20 years ago is coming to play. Again, it's all full circle, right? There's nothing new happening,
Right,
but
right.
yeah. So no, I don't know anyone who still teaches those skills. But I
No.
would say that even my children are actually doing practice typing and stuff nowadays because I think their handwriting is atrocious. Number one, and then number two, I think they realize that typing is something they're going to have to do at least in the foreseeable future. But who knows, man? What the
Oh,
way
oh
things
yeah,
are
no,
going.
touch typing such an essential skill. Do you use a conventional keyboard? Are you so techy that you've gone with like using an unconventional keyboard?
No, I still can't get away from a regular keyboard.
You're a
I still
QWERTY
have
guy.
I actually have an external one just so I can, sit further back because after 40, the eyesight, you need the screen a little further away.
Right on. So you know, to the start of teaching computer science.
Mm,
After that, I got into teaching mathematics and
mhm,
science
mhm,
because I am a math and science teacher, and in
right,
Manitoba, that's typically what you do. And then I've traveled, and so I'm essentially a mathematics teacher now.
sure.
That's kind of became my area of expertise, but it's all even for when I started teaching math, it was always done through
Mm,
applied mathematics of using projects and project based learning, even like
sure.
15, 20 years ago
Mhm,
to kind of drive home that because sitting and doing questions is
mhm,
never going
mhm.
to be fun for anybody. So that's kind of like why I love design and putting those elements in my mathematics
Mhm.
courses because kids got to do something
Oh,
and they
yeah.
got to do something that they're interested in. They have to have a project. They have to have
Mhm,
something that they're interested in, that they want
mhm.
to do it, that fun in some regards, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's awesome to hear about kind of where you got where you are. And it's always, again, it's always exciting to hear people's journeys and it gets you excited about you might be in a rut at the moment, but to talk about the journey you've been through always re energizes people. So it's great to hear that kind of thing. So, in your role now at Biba or B, what are your initials for your
Oh,
whole school group?
well, these schools are BIBS, so
Okay.
Beanstalk International Bilingual School.
Hmm.
So it's actually the first bilingual school in China.
Oh, wow.
So
I didn't realize that.
we were the leaders in terms
Mm,
of that, and so just for anyone out there who's curious, is that a bilingual school we are able to accept Chinese nationals,
right.
while an international
Right.
school like WAB or ISB
Mhm,
is
mhm.
not able to with their license. So in many
Sure.
cases, it's a licensing thing, but also we have the majority of our students being able to do a bilingual diploma, so
Oh,
the
that's
IB
excellent.
diploma. So that means that
Right.
they're taking both English and Chinese at
Mm.
language A.
Language A.
So
Wow. That's
so that
awesome.
well, it's just such a good value for these
Absolutely.
families to be able
Mm,
to give their children an opportunity to be able
mhm,
to go overseas and
mhm,
to direct entry into universities and not need to
mhm.
do any kind of foundation program. But then many of them plan to come back to China, so they still need to be able to survive and
Sure.
communicate in Chinese to be able to
Yep.
have that lifestyle when they come back.
Yeah, and since both of you, both of us are Chinese learners ourselves, Chinese language learners ourselves, we understand that business Chinese is very different from conversational Chinese. The terminology and the nuances and the way you conduct business is very different than on a relational level, like in a family or in a community
Mhm.
group. And so that's important that those students are having exposure to both of those types of ways of communicating.
Right on. Yes, they certainly need to be able to. But that's somewhat limited in some
Mm,
regards. So they still need
sure.
to develop those skills because, like the mathematics vocabulary, they're not going to have. Their
Right.
mathematics is done. Language of instruction is English, but
Mhm.
for the most part, they're pretty much ready. And we've had some kids that have graduated that have come back that are doing well, and
Okay.
and so it just gives them an opportunity. It prepares them
Mhm.
at least to go on to tertiary education. So
Sure.
that's important. That's what
Absolutely.
parents want.
That's the whole goal, right? So to have good, happy students that become good, happy citizens.
That's yeah, absolutely.
So, in your role that you have in your current position, you work with different subject groups across the different campuses. Is that how it works, or what is it
Yeah.
exactly that you're doing?
Okay, so there's a variety of things that we're doing, and one of the key things is looking at the horizontal and vertical articulation.
Mm,
The big project that I'm working on right now is including the Chinese standards into our scope and sequences. So that's we're looking at mathematics right now, and then we're also looking at science. And science, we're looking at utilizing the Chinese national curriculum combined with the next generation science standards, so the
mm,
NGSS. So putting those in, but also putting in some of those Chinese cultural elements. So
mhm,
there's the Chinese virtues that we're
mhm,
looking at
mhm,
infusing into our program
mhm,
because we have to celebrate our Western heritage, our Western
mhm, mhm,
educational philosophies, but we
mhm,
also need to appreciate and respect that there is a history of education in China, and education is very, very valued in the East. So bringing those two kind of educational philosophies together
mhm,
into something that is going to work within the IB programs is what we're doing.
mhm.
But like you and I were discussing earlier in terms of about horizontal articulation, and it's what happens is that
Mm,
many of our teachers, it's a lonely job, right?
yeah.
You're there with the kids all day. You have some collaboration time, but how much you do is so you
Yeah.
don't have time to be able to go out and actively find out what's happening in so and so's science class.
Mhm,
Is there any connection?
mhm,
Is English doing something that I can piggyback on, or I
mhm,
can you know figure out how that's going to help me. So that's where documenting the curriculum is so
mhm,
critical. So we're working on developing systems that it's
mhm,
going to allow that to happen. So
mhm,
people have access to it. People are celebrating it,
mhm,
and then it's also being used to help them with their
mm.
planning and with developing things like interdisciplinary units, and just using it
Sure.
to share what's happening. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where we are. That's kind of where we are right now in terms of the projects we're working on. We're working on
Okay.
ensuring that the standards are there.
Mhm.
We're working on the horizontal and vertical articulation, but we also do quite a bit of professional development.
Mm, and
And
I wanna
that's
ask you about that, in a bit. I have a few other questions first, if you don't mind.
okay, okay, okay. I
Because I
will.
think professional development's always a good one, and I know you and I, being that we conduct a lot of professional development for people, we can talk all day about that, but I have a couple questions to carry on from what you said before.
Certainly.
Um, so in your vertical articulation and your even your horizontal articulation projects, a lot of the listeners are design teachers, as we've alluded to,
Hmm.
and being an island to yourself a lot of times, or being in a department of two or three, a very small department, it's easy sometimes to lose sight of the big picture. And what I mean by that, it's not anyone's fault, but it's just that sometimes we forget what's going on out there. So, how do you ensure that all the stakeholders in this project are properly informed?
Okay, so it comes down to with that celebration of learning in
Hmm.
terms of that we know that there's going to be something that's going to come out in terms of it. So there's things like thematic weeks.
Mm,
There are the curriculum is published and sent out. There is horizontal collaboration meetings. So
mm,
year level teams get together to discuss, especially when it comes around to interdisciplinary, but we're also
okay.
looking at those interdisciplinary links. So we're trying to make that go public. So we're doing some things. Is it working perfectly?
Mm,
Is it satisfying? Is it being the best
mm,
and kind of like what you're talking about? And the
mm.
answer is no. Well,
Yeah,
not yet,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But
Growth
those
mindset, man.
are yeah. Oh no, for sure. But those are the things that we've identified,
Yeah.
and we definitely want that to happen
Mm,
more. we need more entry points into interdisciplinary.
Mhm. Mhm.
And what happens, at least in my experience at the few schools that I've been at, is that design kind of takes it on the chin when it comes to interdisciplinary, is because design could be, you could do
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and just the way it looks and just the way
Mm.
it works, anything could be interdisciplinary. So you've got to protect
Mhm.
design, and you've got to
Mhm.
protect math
Mm.
in many
Mm.
cases, and you got to find other ways for other subject groups to get
Mhm.
involved. And that is awareness.
Mhm.
That's the
Mhm.
development of awareness,
Mhm.
but it's also looking at skills. And
Mhm.
when you're taking a look at your ATL skills, you have to know what skills are being developed in other areas, so there isn't a constant repetition, because the
Mm.
students aren't going to tell you, right? Or they will if they're really getting fed up, but for the most part they're
Yeah.
not going to tell you. And
Yeah.
so you end up looking at, if you do it, it depends on how you map it, but if you
Mm.
look at it in such a way that it's after the fact mapping,
Mhm.
well, what are the skills that are going to be developed? Those are the ones that are kind of the easiest to do.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
get a lot of communication,
Mhm. Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
You get a lot of organization,
Mm.
but where's the reflection?
Mhm.
Where's
Mhm.
that coming in? Where are the development of the affective skills coming through?
Mhm.
You're not really seeing those. And then ultimately, if we're not focusing our programs around the
Mm.
thinking skills, we're
Mhm.
really missing opportunities. So
Mhm.
that's where that other piece needs to fit in, is the horizontal and vertical
Mhm.
mapping of the
Mhm.
skills,
Mhm.
and finding ways for subjects to incorporate skills that they might say, well, that's not our domain.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Yep.
so those are the kinds of things that we're working on right now. How about you guys? What kind of
Mm.
solution you guys coming up with?
Oh, well, we're in a very different situation, and so, um, but we are building, and so we're in a actually we're kind of in a same mindset, because we're adopting standards and adapting standards, and then we're looking at that from a K-12 situation, and so yeah, looking at the ATLs, that's what we have to always come back to, is those ATL skills. How are they being taught? Where are they being explicitly measured? How are you reporting that back to parents and students? And so I
Well,
think
and,
in
and
the end, that's what we end up doing.
Well, and especially now that they're cross program and cross programs, and everyone needs to take a part in the development of those,
Hmm.
it becomes a little bit more important that they're carefully planned.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And, as a consultant of a lot of soon to be IB schools, that's one of the big questions they ask is how do you map these skills out? And I always say, well, if you find a good model, tell me, because in a lot of
Yeah,
places it's just not done well. And I'd love to see. And the thing is because there's so many strands that have been articulated as examples.
hmm
And so I think that's part of it. And the intention of those ATLs was that they were to be born from your curriculum, and born from your subject guides. And so I think that's where there's a lot of it's quite gray. It's a gray area on how you want to go about that.
Well, and what happens too is people get, it's like going to the International House of Pancakes, where you get like a 30-page menu, right? Where you go like, I don't know what to order. I don't. There's so much here that
Yeah.
you get paralysis
Yeah.
by choice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so when you take a look, at least in the MYP, at the number of skill
Yeah.
indicators
Yeah.
and the uncountable number of
Yeah.
skill indicators, you start to
Yeah.
go like,
It's
this
overwhelming.
is too
Yeah.
much. Yeah, this is too much. I just
Yeah.
can't manage this.
Yeah.
So I like to sort of say to people, like, look at the categories and look at the
Yep. The
clusters.
clusters.
Kind of forget
Absolutely.
about the indicators and see actually you're
Hmm.
doing, and
Hmm.
see what skills the students
Sure.
need. So when
Absolutely.
you take a look at one of your design units, right?
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
those skills that students are not going to have,
Hmm.
it's going to vary as well from kid to
Sure.
kid,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
It's going to vary.
Agreed. Yeah, and going along with that, one of the big criticisms of I say the most recent design guide was where do we teach skills, and the whole idea was that those skills were now sort of pulled out. And when it doesn't say in the ATLs is able to handle a table saw, but
Mhm.
there are still self-regulation skills and other things and procedural skills that you can teach. That can work for any number of things, whether it's a table saw or a sewing machine or a stove top.
Well,
It's
and
crazy.
the bottom line is that the guides are there to help us, but you've got to provide the
Mm,
students with the learning experience that's going to best get them ready for the task that they're going to
mhm.
do. So sometimes you got to just throw everything out and say, hey, you
Yeah,
know what? Right? I don't know where this fits in, but I've got to spend some time with health and safety here.
sure.
These kids aren't being safe. I need to spend some time with that, and you just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's awesome. So I want to run a scenario past you and ask you kind of what your take would be. So you've got a new design teacher who's got experience in other IB schools. They come to one of your schools that you're overlooking, and they're just really wanting to shake up the scope and sequence and the course outline that's already been established. And I just kind of want to know how you would manage that as a manager, but then also, and we were talking before, and we can bring this up at the end. How is it that you can get people outside of that design department to start to see what it is, the method behind the madness, so to speak?
Right on. Yeah, no, that I've certainly lived through this on a number of occasions, as I'm sure you have. Is the idea is you need to put systems and processes in place as an organization to prevent what I call suitcase teaching.
Absolutely.
So suitcase teaching is where someone comes in and says these units are garbage.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've done these before at
Hmm.
my other school, so I'm going to do these. When in many cases it's kind of the arrogance of the newbie, is they don't know the people, they don't
Yeah.
know the customers, really, they don't know the clientele,
Hmm.
but they
Hmm.
also don't know what resources are available to them or the constraints that are available to them.
Hmm.
So I definitely explain to them and say that, first off, you need to honor and respect those that came before you. They were professionals. They found that this was what was best for our community,
Hmm.
and that these units were developed over a series of years. Where, is anything perfect? Well, no, everything can be improved. So you certainly have an opportunity to improve them.
Hmm.
If you can make a compelling case for a unit that may fit in, we can take a
Hmm.
look at it later
Hmm.
once you've established that you're able to deliver one of our pre-developed units with
Hmm.
some tweaks
Hmm.
developed collaboratively with
Hmm.
your department. So if you're able to do that, then we can certainly take a look at this hot kind of kick-ass unit that you've got that you
Yeah,
really really want
exactly.
to do.
Yeah.
But the planning and preparation needs to go in. So we've got documentation that has a curricular change
Mm,
process.
mhm,
So how does that work? How is that structured? But we certainly don't want to discourage innovation. We
mhm,
don't want
mhm,
to discourage creativity, because, as you know,
mhm.
that we're not following a set curriculum for design. We're following the guide. We're following the
Right.
framework. So
Yeah.
we can change it,
Yeah.
but there needs to be a compelling reason to change it,
Mhm.
especially if there's people in the department who developed that unit that are still there.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, you don't wanna cause a
Right? It's
rift.
just it's just such a disrespect element, right?
Yeah,
Thinking that
absolutely.
wherever you've come from is going to be better than what we've done.
Right.
Um, and maybe it is, but
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
there needs to be a structure for that.
Mhm,
Now, that being said, right, is just, I can't see people coming in with having too much. If your tasks are open ended
mm,
and ill defined and allow for that voice and choice amongst your students, I can't see people coming into your design department and say, like, hey, that unit's that unit's
Yeah.
garbage, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
I agree.
the unit itself is going to be determined by
Mm.
what's going to happen,
Mhm.
right? In
Mhm.
terms of the design cycle and moving
Yeah.
through that, there's going to be so much that kids can do, if you're allowing for that, and you
Mm.
should. So if you're
Absolutely.
allowing for that, then maybe your unit is not going to be better simply because it's not ill-defined and it's
Mhm.
not an open opportunity for students to
Mm.
develop themselves and to solve problems, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I have had that happen to me on numerous occasions where either I was the head of department or what have you, and someone comes in like, I don't like this unit, we're going to change it. And I'm like, well, this is what was going on at the time. This is this, and I'm not closed off to listening to examples, and I'm not closed off to great units. I definitely want that to happen, but a lot of times there's been a lot of dialogue and planning, collaboration that have gone into developing that in the first place. Where you have problems in the smaller schools, they've got one design teacher, one leaves, one comes in, and that person doesn't have no historical reference to why, or just they don't have any perspective on where that unit was inspired from and how it all came about, and it may need to change. They may have been told in recruiting that, hey, we need to change some things around the design department. So I agree, though. I think you have to go slow and steady. I would say don't throw out the baby with the bathwater necessarily, and to try to keep that all kind of tied up tight, and to work things in slowly. Give yourself one thing that administrators shouldn't do when they come to a new school is change everything day one. The same is true with teachers. You shouldn't come in day one and just throw everything out unless you're starting a new program, which of
Yeah.
course then you've been hired for a different reason. But
It's just
so yeah,
it's
go ahead.
just such
Sorry.
a human nature thing to
It
want to
is.
do that, though, to make your mark, to
Yeah.
show your value. And I think that, as a mature educator like yourself, and when you come through and you have those years of perspective, you realize that's not how you're going to make your mark. That's how you're going to flounder. That's
Oh,
how you're going to
absolutely.
upset people. That's going to be how you alienate
Mm.
people and show that you're not collaborative,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the last thing on earth that you want to do, as
Right.
especially as an IB educator, is you want
Oh,
you want to make
absolutely.
sure that you're erring on the side of ultra collaboration, right? It's
Exactly. Exactly. So, and then let's just another scenario. Someone's been to your school a couple of years and is really been struggling to get any buy-in from the community as to what the design department's all about. And what I mean by that is, um, people have everyone thinks they're an expert on education because they were all educated at some point in time, right?
right,
And
right.
so, as a design educator, though, I feel it's the most misunderstood subject, at least that I've come across. Um, and sometimes that requires a lot of effort on the teacher to educate people. So, can you tell me a little bit about your perspective on that?
Absolutely, and just from my experience in going around schools and doing school visits and those sorts of things, is that design often gets short shrift.
Mm,
It's expensive. It
mm,
costs money, both
mm,
in equipment and in materials and in time to
mhm,
be able to successfully do a design program. It costs a lot of time, so it's very important to align the design program, at least in an MYP school, with the personal project, and show
mm,
how that design and personal project have these links.
mhm.
And if you could start to bring it in terms of the one thing that we've done really well, and it's led by the design department, is something we call dream time.
Oh, okay.
And so what dream time is, it's personal project light, but following the design cycle.
Mm.
And so we do it throughout the year. It's done mostly outside. There's some dedicated time. Design offers some support to it, but it's done as a competition. And
Oh,
it's
okay.
basically the premise is like genius time,
Yeah.
or where you can
Genius
work on
hour or
something.
something like that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Where you can work on something of your own creation.
Mm.
There's very little constraints in terms of that. We have budget for that. And then we also have uh, math massive prizes where we give out drones and programmable robots and
Wow.
markers and an
Mm,
iPad Pro last year, right? So so kids kind of get
mm,
into it.
mm.
Well, they don't kind of get into it; they really get into it.
Absolutely.
But but it does that thing, even if you don't do that.
Mm,
Okay, so my suggestion to anyone out there whose maybe department is poorly understood
mm.
is you've got to make it visible.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to get the kids walking around the school. They've got to take their
Mhm,
projects home. They've got to
mhm,
show their parents. It's
mm,
got to get in a newsletter. There has to be a display in a centrally located place that has the products that are created.
mhm,
And
mhm.
then you have to get kids talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to hear the student voice talking about it and saying,
Mm,
well, how much do I love that, and how much of a rewarding experience, even though it was hard, even though
mhm,
I hated doing aspects of it, there were the final result
mm,
made for a better product or outcome
mhm,
than if I didn't go through those steps, right?
mm.
And the other thing is making sure, I try to make sure that our teachers go through every unit, goes through the whole cycle.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's always a debatable point about teaching things into broken up, sections, and I think, probably with more experienced teachers who have a very stable student body and who've been at a school a while, it's okay to break things up a bit more. But I agree. I think working smarter and not harder by running through that whole cycle, and then if you have time at the end, maybe doing a Criterion BC challenge or something like that. But I think definitely go through the whole cycle because you want to see the thing from start to finish with some
yeah.
reflection time as well. I agree completely. I'm glad to hear you say that, Terry.
Well, yeah, I think it's of critical importance, and the same thing with PHE. I want them to go through the cycle with PHE. The
Hmm.
same thing with science. I want them to go through the cycle in science. And so, if we start to look at Stephen Taylor does a very good job with this,
Hmm.
with these cycles. That's his thing. But if you look at cycles in terms of the development of a unit, and students start to see, well, the design cycle is very explicit. Let's start to see more explicit cycles where each stage of the development of the unit is done in the other subject areas.
Hmm.
And that's why design is just to make a case for it being the most important subject,
Mhm, mhm.
is that, well, because it follows that very logical and
Yeah,
rational progression
yeah.
through learning,
Mhm.
and you learn how to do the design cycle, you learn how to do the personal project. Now
Absolutely.
you can take that anywhere in the world. So
Mhm, mhm.
like I've got a good buddy, and I'm sure you know him as well as Raphael.
Mhm,
And he says, I said, like, how do you do this stuff? You know, I'm very interested in how do you get together and how do you write a book,
mhm,
and
mhm.
how do you put together this big conference of what? And he just goes, I just follow the design cycle.
Yep.
You know,
My
I just
man
follow that,
Raphael, I
right?
like it.
You know, I just follow that,
Yep.
and in terms of it, and it
Mhm.
just, well, these are adult skills as well, right?
Yeah.
If we're able to do these things as
Mhm.
adults, we're going to be successful with any kind of, because we're always doing projects. Whether the project is how do I pay for my car,
Right.
right? That's how do I buy a
Plan a birthday
car?
party, the whole
You
bit,
know,
man. Yeah.
we're always doing it, and the people
Yep.
that can do it well are the people that take a look at it as progressions at
Right.
different
That's right.
areas, and they
Mhm.
plan it out. They know
Yep.
how it's going to look.
Mhm.
They have some idea, but they're not completely sold on that final look. That there's going
Absolutely.
to be adjustments, there's going to be
Yeah.
changes. Putting together timelines, putting together success criteria.
Mhm, mhm.
Anyone who's successful is doing those things,
Yeah.
whether they know what it's called or where it comes from. But anyone who's really, really successful has those kinds of skills. And so, if we can give it to everybody, then
Mhm.
everybody has an opportunity to be successful.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate that, and it's good to hear it from a non-design teacher perspective, even though we've established now that you're a design teacher.
All right.
And
Everybody is at heart.
everybody actually is. And to carry on from that, actually, at a former school I was at, we actually took the design cycle, and then we identified all the other cycles that exist in the student's life. We put them all together, and of course, they
Mm,
all match the design cycle, whether it's the writing cycle or the
yeah.
scientific method or whatever it is that they're doing, even in PE and all kinds of different things, in team sports and Beijing games, whatever it might be. There's a design cycle esque aspect of all of these things. And so I do believe that it's become so much of my DNA that I don't even think about it anymore. It's just part of it.
Well, and exactly, and coming back to your original question on how do you raise the profile of design in a
Hmm.
school, especially a smaller school when you're just one person, I believe that giving PD to your colleagues
Mm,
and proposing PD to your administration and having that opportunity to share,
hmm,
because design teachers are also very passionate about what they're doing, and they
hmm.
if you look at a subject, they're one of the um, well, there's many subjects, but design is one where you have the true believers, where the people come in
Absolutely.
because they're in many cases they're misunderstood, and people they're a little they're a little maligned, and that
Mm.
people think, well, they're just there playing with toys. It's just
Yeah.
wood shop, right? You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
it's just wood shop, or it's
Yeah.
just or they're just playing on a computer. They're just playing
Mm.
computer games, right?
Yeah.
So so these folks can go out and share with their colleagues. They can
Hmm.
share. We had some design teachers doing going through the design cycle with parents, where the parents made
Hmm.
some
Hmm. Hmm.
geodesic domes,
Oh,
going
great.
through following that design cycle,
Hmm.
and having that opportunity to share that just kind of it's not just going to happen.
No,
So you've
no,
got to take action. You've
that's
got
right.
to do something
Hmm.
to say, okay, so this is what I'm going to do, and making it visible, making the
Yeah.
learning visible comes in a variety of ways. You can have student work going out. You can have student voice going out. You can put PD on for
Hmm.
parents
Hmm.
and teachers, but also coming out and sharing online and
Hmm.
getting out there and sharing in forums and groups like this, right?
Sure.
It's there's lots of opportunity, but it's people got to recognize that it's also a very natural, these are
Hmm.
very natural skills, and
Mm.
some have it, but people are better if they're taught it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that actually segues great into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which you've alluded to a couple times, which is professional development or PD. And so you and I both are heavily involved in PD and in the region, but also in our own institutions. And so, just on a normal day, now I'm not talking the current school closure type PD at the moment, but just in a normal school year. Tell me a little bit about how you guys uh, allocate PD, plan PD, decide who gets to be part of that. How does that work for you guys?
Okay, so we divided into, first off, there's what I would call non-negotiable
Mhm,
PD sessions.
mhm,
So we
mhm.
have to provide PD at least if we're just talking middle school, or most of your listeners middle school teachers. Is that
Both,
your audience?
both. It's
Okay.
MYP and so even some DP. So we're looking
Okay.
6 to 12. Yeah.
Okay. So when you're looking at that, there's some non-negotiables, and you
Hmm.
have to allow an opportunity for supervisors to get trained in delivering the personal project. So
Hmm.
there's a number
Hmm.
of sessions that revolve around PP. There's some just housekeeping type of
Hmm.
PD that you need to do, how our behavior management system works,
Hmm.
classroom management, reporting, how to structure report comments are common features in
Hmm.
PD.
Hmm.
Then we have people that have positions of responsibility. And so those
Sure.
people are typically tapped on the shoulder, and said, hey, would like you to organize some PD, whether it's done in breakout sessions or whether it's done as whole school,
Mm.
is depending on the time of year that's happening. So, for example, our IT coach will lead different PD, maybe in terms of using IT in a classroom, but it might be something as well in terms of what are some really cool things you can do
Mhm.
with the tools we have in place,
Yeah.
like Office 365, how to use
Mhm.
Teams effectively,
Mhm.
how to use ManageBack to properly do things. So
Mhm.
there's PD on that, and then we just throw it out there, just open whoever wants to lead
Mhm.
something, and that's where opportunities say, like earlier talking about the design teacher saying, I'd love to do something about design to share what I'm doing with
Sure.
design. So there's
Mm.
so there's opportunities for that, but then we got to do the brass tack stuff, right?
Yeah.
We've got to go through and deliver some PD on inquiry-based learning and touch
Sure.
on that. We got to look
Sure.
at concept-based and
Mhm.
developing those conceptual inquiry.
Mhm.
Differentiation is always a huge topic and a hot button topic, and then ultimately every teacher, every IB teacher wants to sit and talk about assessment till the cows come home, right? You know,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
assessment and
Mm.
assessment. How do I assess? What do I do? And
Yeah.
how do I report on that? Is
Yeah.
is monstrous. So that
Mm.
that kind of like covers off
Yeah.
many of the peak elements. Of course, we send anyone who's new to the programs to either face to face or online training, depending if it's in Beijing or if it's. We typically don't send people away, but we typically train people, and then we're
Mhm.
required to train everyone doing AP, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, PD is such an essential piece that, and in many cases, I like to think that that's the draw. That's how we get people into our schools.
Sure.
Is we give them, we say to them, okay, so this is what we're going to give you. You're going to come out after the end
Mhm.
of your contract with a bit more knowledge, a bit more experience, but you're
Mhm.
going to be able to look back at these experiences and you'll become a better practitioner.
Yeah. And so thank you, Terry. That's awesome. And I love to hear that that's your philosophy. And so in leading into that, we're in a really uncertain time at the moment. You're in China, I'm in Korea, but the whole world is experiencing an unprecedented amount of school closure, amount of online teaching. So how do we continue? Because teachers are having to flip classrooms who've never flipped a classroom before. So, what kind of PD do the teachers do now to prepare themselves or to continue to upskill themselves while they're at home or in a hotel or an Airbnb or whatever doing their work?
Right. And I'll be the first to admit that we've done a pretty poor job of this, and I have some defense in that, is that unlike the schools in North America who
Mm,
may have seen it coming, is this
yeah,
happened out of the blue
out of the
while we
blue, man.
while we were on holiday.
Yeah,
So so we got teachers who basically have never returned back home, who are trying to do distance learning with their phone,
yeah,
right? It's
yes,
they
yeah.
don't have access to even an iPad, so they've
Hmm.
been doing distance learning with their phone.
Hmm.
So the types of PD that we've provided and the learnings that have come from this is that you've got to
Hmm.
keep it really simple.
Hmm.
You've
Hmm.
got to keep it. You've got to keep it simple. You got to use tools that you know,
Yeah,
or tools that you can learn quickly. So Zoom has been one that
yeah.
people have been using, and thankfully things like Zoom are pretty
Mm.
easy to use.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and they have great development videos where you can
Yeah,
see what's happening and they can
sure.
walk you through it. So it's good, but we haven't been terrific at it, mostly because everything has happened organically and
Yeah,
ad hoc.
yeah.
And you look at you're quite prolific in terms of generating resources for people, and it's wonderful. It's really wonderful that you do that, and
Yeah.
the time and energy that you put into doing
Mm.
that. But also, when you see that work that you've done in terms of like the wakelet that you put out
Yep,
that has
yep.
all the, like, imagine trying to utilize all of those into one course offering where every
Yeah.
kid's got to
Oh, I
come in.
know. Oh,
It
I know.
seems
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. Yeah.
and then they've got 8 subjects, and so
Mm.
I'm using Zoom and you're using Teams, and now
Yep, yep,
there's videos I got to download on ManageBack, and
yep,
we're
yep.
in there's a million
It's
things, and so
overwhelming.
that's what's happened, right?
Yeah.
People are using Flipgrid and people are using videos on ManageBack
Yep.
and the one of the best ones that I've seen is a teacher just using PowerPoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's old school,
Yeah.
it's super straight up, but
Yep.
it keeps everything in such a linear progression that
Yeah.
you're not like
Yeah.
toggling back and forth to the video, to this, to
Right.
that,
Right.
and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where we are right now, and
Mhm.
it's not terrific, but I've learned a lot about this, and I know how I would do
Mm.
this now if we
Sure.
had to do
Sure.
it over again, right?
Right.
If you had to
Right.
start it over from scratch, how would we do it?
Right.
And for those that are listening, the key thing is that I don't think you can make I don't think you can replicate a school day
Mm. Mm.
virtually through distance learning.
Mhm.
I don't think you can expect that kids will join your synchronous lessons and demand that they join your synchronous lessons.
Yeah.
I think synchronous is there to support those that need that learning,
Yeah.
but everything should be as asynchronous as possible.
Mm.
And the whole idea is that you need to plan your whole unit as an online learning unit. You can't
Yeah.
just plan. So you got to sit down and do some serious thinking on what that's
Yeah.
going to look like and what those formative assessments are going to look like, what
Mhm.
those products are going to be. And and that's kind of where you need to go, but that's a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of work. And that whole
It's a
front
tremendous
end
amount
work
of
is
work.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think people who don't have experience with flipping their classroom or doing those kinds of things, it's a real struggle. But I will say, Terry, in my own experience that I've been observing, is that the teachers who work hard when they're in the school building are the teachers who work hard when they're not in the school building. And so, I mean, in the
That
end, I don't know if
that
you agree with that or not, but
absolutely, absolutely. It's and but there are some heroes emerging.
absolutely.
There are heroes emerging. There are teachers stepping up who are doing fantastic things,
Hmm.
who are maybe a little on the quieter side, who
Yeah, oh, sure.
were maybe not really firing on all cylinders. Maybe the
Mm,
face to face environment isn't entirely for
right.
them. And there are some kids that are coming
Yeah.
out
Oh,
and
yeah. Oh,
starting to
yeah.
shine
Oh,
who
yeah.
maybe this is looking for them. So if you're looking at now, I don't know what it's going to be like for you guys in Korea, but this isn't ending anytime soon here. And then the future, the idea is that some families may just choose not to send their kids back to school
Yeah.
out of fear for
Yeah.
their own safety.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea, what I'm trying to prepare our community for,
Mhm.
is that blended learning
Yep.
isn't normal.
Mhm.
So you're
Yep.
going to need to provide blended learning experiences
Mhm. Mhm.
even when schools do open, because
Yep.
not everyone's going to come back.
Yeah, it's a hybrid model that I think we're all wrestling with at the moment because of quarantines and other things. But also, you're right. There's going to be folks who just don't want to set foot in a crowded building
Well,
after all
and
this.
but when you take a look at it, the incredible learning, I think what's happened with a lot of teachers and teachers that I've talked to is
Mm.
they've had to learn how to become learners again
Oh yeah. Oh
themselves,
yeah. Absolutely.
especially teachers that are a little bit longer in the tooth.
Hmm.
And for many of them have gone, this is going to improve my practice.
Yeah.
This is improving me. I didn't know that I knew how to learn or I needed to learn
Hmm.
this, but
Hmm.
this is definitely improving me. And that's another opportunity where at least maybe not design teachers so much, but
Hmm.
the IT coaches, if you're not an IT coach who's starting to shine right now, and people
Yeah.
collecting zero points, is you're not
Yeah.
you're not doing your job
Yeah.
right,
You might
because
be in a new place. That's right.
this is your day to shine. This is your time in
That's
the
right.
sun,
That's
right?
right.
It's and I've seen so many other from other schools. There's
Mm.
been and you have all you probably have to do is follow you on Twitter to see your, what do you call them, your distant learning superstars.
Yeah, there's some good ones out there, man. And so, but
There
they were
are
doing good work before this, and they'll be doing good work after this. So there's just
absolutely.
some people who have stepped up and emerged as real leaders when it comes to this sort of thing, and a lot of people are asking them for help. So, and I think before the rest of the world thought it might not ever happen to them, and now all of a sudden there's 800 million people who are out of school. It's a different story. So it's crazy.
And it's gonna be the same thing with companies. There's gonna be
Oh,
companies that are
absolutely.
gonna
Sure.
emerge as clear winners,
Hmm.
um, in terms of this. Like the people from Zoom must be just be
Zoom.
going like rubbing
They're
hands
rubbing.
together,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah, man.
Even though
They're
they're
ready.
offering a lot of it
That's
for
right.
free, but it's what kind of benefits are they going to
Yeah.
reap in the long term,
That's
right?
right.
So there's been a
That's
lot
right.
of companies giving stuff out for free. Cognity is
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
shining with
Hmm.
our kids. We got a free thing with Cognity, and our kids are really loving that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Terry, I could sit here and chat with you all day, and I have done that in the past, and I'm sure I'll do it
Yes,
again.
absolutely.
But I think we're going to have to kind of wrap this up. So I want to really thank you, and I appreciate you being so honest and open with your perspectives of design, kind of looking at it from an outsider's perspective. So thanks so much.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
All right.